Good afternoon, guys. Again, thanks for joining Legacy Men's podcast. Gary Trevor, Jason Gonzalez. We are tickled pink to have Kevin Tinter with us this afternoon. A gentleman who walks his talk and says what he means and means what he says. He is an author of a brilliant book called Uncommon. And we spent some time yesterday visiting with him. He is a father of 3 sons and a beautiful daughter. He has a sterling wife called Rebecca. I'll give you one example quickly of him. He's the guy that got together with a bunch of folks and said, we got to build a well in Kenya because water's so difficult to come by. We can go to a faucet and turn the faucet on, and we get instant water. So Kevin takes his family to Kenya. They say to him, Kevin, we love the well. We have one issue. We got to get the water to the village. And so Kevin talks to Becca. Becca goes, make it happen. So Kevin brings up the money, pays for it through his family, and brings water to the village. This is the kind of guy that we have on this afternoon, Kevin Tinter. So welcome, Kevin, to our program this afternoon, sir.
Thanks, gents. Great to be here.
Yeah, awesome. And thank you so much for tuning in again here at the Legacy Men's podcast, where we learn how to live and leave a godly legacy. I'm also extremely excited that not only do we have Kevin as a brother in Christ, but I also have him as a brother as a Marine.
Semper Fi.
Stoked to get into this. We're actually going to jump into the 3 habits that will change your life. So could you just walk us through that, Kevin, just so that we can understand where you're coming from, that just the gist of the 3 habits?
Absolutely. There's 3 habits that I've identified that if you apply these to every discipline of your life, they will change your life. They will help you create what I call uncommon freedom. The first habit is to always row upstream. When you think about everything good in your life, everything that you want, it lies upstream. You have to work hard for it, but if you put in the effort, you'll get it. The second thing is to always get to 1. Math is a beautiful science because it's always the same. And what we know is that a whole number, when you multiply it over time, even you start with a small number like a penny, if you multiply it, you double it every day for 30 days, you end up with millions of dollars. And when you have a negative number and you multiply it, you end up with a massively negative number. And so the beautiful thing about math and getting to 1 is you can we as men tend to think we have to have a huge step, right? We're looking for that big effect. And if you can just understand that all you have to do is get to 1 and then compound that, you'll see massive results in your life. And then the third habit is to upgrade your circle. And this isn't saying that you're better than other people. This isn't saying that you're going to leave people behind. But this is identifying that, especially when you think of your closest spheres of influence, that anyone that you allow, that you give permission to influence you, they're ultimately determining where you're going to end up in life. Amen. And so being very intentional to always upgrade your circle is the third habit.
Nice.
That's good stuff. Thanks, Jay. Yeah. Kevin, again, thanks for coming. We just are tickled pink. We spent some time with you yesterday, and it was just thrilling exercise to get to know who you are. Let's start off with basically your family, mom, dad, siblings. Most important to me, of course, is how you came to know Christ as your personal Lord and Savior, which is, to me, the very foundation for the spirit of excellence in your life.
Amen. Yeah, I was born in Cleveland, Ohio, and raised by parents that are still married, fortunately.
Praise God.
That's kind of an anomaly in today's culture.
Is,
grateful for that. I was raised in a Christian family. My dad hasn't really practiced his faith for most of my life. But just the fact that he did at some point, I know it had an influence on my life, but I'm very grateful to my mom. I think there's a lot of great men out there who had a mom who really poured into their life spiritually. So she's probably one of the biggest spiritual influences that I had in my life. I'm very grateful for her. I've got 3 brothers, so I'm the oldest of 3 boys. And so I had a very rough and tumble growing up, childhood. My parents were, lower middle class. My dad was a music teacher, moonlighted as a photographer, and my mom was a stay-at-home mom. So we, my parents made it work. We never went hungry, but we certainly did not live a luxurious life by American standards. By world standards, we are incredibly blessed. I accepted Christ in the upper bunk of my bed when I was about 5 years old. I don't remember the exact day, but I do remember doing it. And it was just one of these things where I knew that I needed a Savior, and I knew that I was a sinner. And so I said, Jesus, come into my life, and I accept you as my Savior.
Wow, yeah. That's awesome. Can you walk us through, Because as a 5-year-old, and I love this, right? Like you're already a child of God, right? There's that presence of like something that you know that is different, that you still need to make a choice. What were those influences? Was it church on Sundays? Was it maybe somebody in kids ministry? Or what do you recall that you were just like, man, I just learned that I have to make a decision, you know?
Yeah, great question. Because even though I attended church every week, I don't remember, who was my Sunday school teacher or anything like that. I don't
me
remember
neither.
anyone that had that influence on me. I suspect that it was primarily my mom, and I'm sure that she read the Bible, kids' versions of Bibles to us as a kid, and
That's beautiful.
and so I'm like that just has to be where it came from.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean that's just honoring women. We love to do that on the
we
show because we have a lot of great women in our lives, women of faith,
Right.
and that is that one true main thing, right? Is that they can carry that on, that legacy, by just doing something as simple as reading something to them at night before they go to bed.
Yes.
Obviously, you can go with all the other standardized, rhymes and all those good things, but there's some really cool resources out there nowadays, like the kids' Bible app.
Oh, yeah.
In the Bible app, I mean, you could literally have them playing games and answering questions. So that's really cool to hear that at that age, you're just seeing and viewing your mom in prayer, going to church, being who she is, and then still understanding the conceptual. I have to make a decision myself. It's not just my parents have this, and I'm with their faith. It's like, no, it's my decision. That's really cool.
Amen.
Thanks for sharing.
So walk us through, because this next part just is so away from society. Walk us through getting into school. You went to high school, then you went to college, where you met Becca.
Yeah. So
Because that, to me, that is such a powerful point that I think men need to realize of what you're going to be about to say.
Okay. So graduated from a small private Christian school in Medina, Ohio. Went there for 2 years. I was actually homeschooled for 6 years prior to that, and then went to a private school the year before that, and then public school. So I've done just about every possible, K through 12 education scenario that there is. And then right after graduation, met my wife at like a college and career type group at church. So we didn't go to the same high school, but we met shortly after high school. And what drew me to her, we didn't date initially, but she was, independent. She was living away from her family, in her own apartment. She was a college athlete at a junior college, and working a job. And I was just impressed by her. I could tell she was a hardworking lady. So we went on our first date, Christmas Eve of 1996. Kind of a weird date, or weird day to go on a first date, but her parents were doing a home build, and so they were living in an apartment, and it just worked out for us.
Wow,
So
cool.
Our date lasted 10 hours, no sex. But it was funny, that night I was like, I think I could marry this girl. But at the same time, I was, 19 years old? And I'm like, there's no way I could know that I would marry her. It was just one of these things where like, I think I could, but is it possible? But it didn't take long for us to realize we were probably going to be together forever. So we did end up getting married at the ripe old age of 21. I flew out to Oregon to propose to her because her family moved to Oregon. We went out to what I thought was a nice restaurant, told them, we just got engaged, and they offered us champagne. And we're like, we're too young to drink. So they gave us sparkling cider.
Yeah.
But, getting married at a young age, honestly, was, I think, one of the biggest blessings God ever gave me. And I encourage young men, when I talk to them all the time, get married. Now, get married to the right woman. My brother just shared this with me. I didn't realize I gave him this advice, but when he told me I said this, I was like, dang, I'm smarter than I thought I was. I said, don't marry the woman you think you can live with. Marry the girl that you know you can't live without.
Oh, that's cool.
So
I like that.
Work hard to find that girl. But like I said, getting married at a young age saved me from a lot of stupidity.
Were you guys both centered in your faith?
Yes.
Or at least balanced?
Yeah.
Okay.
I consider us incredibly blessed because we know that, typically, if your parents are divorced, the likelihood of you ending up divorced is significantly higher. Now, God's grace is sufficient.
Amen.
And so, I don't want to take away from that, but there are some things that are indicators. So we're incredibly fortunate that both of our parents are still, in their first original marriage and still married today.
Praise God.
So I think that gave us a great foundation for our marriage. But, we had to learn. When you're 21 years old, we were discussing yesterday, a man's brain isn't fully developed till roughly
Right.
25. So I was barely, 82% brain developed, and my wife got to finish, raising me, I guess,
Yeah.
to get me to 25.
I think
ahead.
we talked about something that's really important.
Yeah.
Is that here on this podcast we like to get real about it, and a lot of people nowadays are waiting a longer period of time to find the one while they're sleeping with many. And so some of the things that we talked about, like the gateways of pornography and what that does to the brain, what that does to your faith, and the woman that you're going to end up with, right, that you can't live without. That is extremely detrimental. And so I applaud men for, the ones that are holding off on having sex until it's truly the marriage bed.
Yeah.
I applaud you. For the men that haven't done that, I've been there, and I can tell you that sin does carry into a marriage, and it's really hard, but only Jesus can cover that hole, right?
Amen.
And so when I asked you about your faith in marriage and where you're at, spiritual maturity matters, right? And so finding somebody that's equally yoked will never be any different, right? And finding that woman that you truly can't live without and having the faith and being safeguarded by something bigger than both of you is ultimately the greatest win that you can have. But I can say that a lot of men nowadays, even if they find the right woman, they will still be searching for something else because that's what the world is telling them, whether it be via Facebook or Instagram or Snap or whatever you're watching. It's like, have as much as you want, and then you end up unfulfilled.
Well,
right?
Satan is a snake. Yes. And what I've observed, and I distinctly remember this switch flipping in me. Satan, he knows what he's doing, right? He knows what our temptations are. So when I was dating and engaged to my wife, she was by far my biggest sexual temptation. And then I got married, and then we moved from Ohio to Oregon, and we ended up finishing school together on campus in Oregon. And all of a sudden, I started noticing all these other pretty college girls. That when I was engaged, and my wife was my biggest sexual temptation, honestly, I didn't notice all these other girls. But then all of a sudden, I'm married to a beautiful young lady, and I remember, why am I noticing all of these girls? And I realized it's because my wife was no longer my number one sin temptation. It was other ladies. And so regardless of where you're at in your marriage life, in your relationships, Satan knows what he's going to do. He's going to tempt you with what you're not supposed to do, not with what you're supposed to do. So I just remember that. It was just this profound realization of, I had no issue looking at other girls when we were dating and engaged. And then we got married, and all of a sudden it was like a switch flipped. And so that's how Satan operates.
Yeah.
So then basically, how did you, so tell men, because men struggle with that, even guys who've been married for a long, long time. A lot of my pilot friends, they've been married for 30, 40 years. They dump their wife and pick up a 24-year-old and think it's going to be a better thing.
Yeah.
How did you work through that? Was there material? Was there books? Did you talk to your wife, your pastor? Because what was your community then, which you've talked about, that got you through that period?
What was the floating device?
Yeah, what was the floating device?
I mean,
That's good.
the floating device was other Christian men that were also married. To be honest with you, back then, I didn't have the maturity to discuss that with my wife. In fact, when she listens to this podcast, it might be the first time she hears that, that it was a struggle for me. I mean, you think about it. You're newly married. You're like, I don't want to break my wife's heart and share this with her. But just having a community of other Christian men that were also married, we were going to a church that had a very large, a surprising amount of couples that were married and going to college together. So it was just really fortunate that I had some friends that were also married, and we could help hold each other accountable.
I love that,
from that
because we're going to be jumping into that when we get to the 3 habits again and touching on that, the upstream portion especially, and who you surround yourself with, right? As far as going past marriage and then being in the military, because this is something that you and I share in common as well, and Gary also being in the military, is that's a really hard place to be. And this might be for other individuals in sports, the locker room, just kind of like the guy's guy vibe, that it's like, priority number one is not the faith.
Right.
Right. And it's just drinking, there's partying, there's just, you get released into this world. Not that I don't love the military, right? Because we talked about how much it doesn't matter where you come from, what your background is, how old you are, what your ethnicity is. I mean, you guys just and girls bond together like no other. But there's a lot of sinful things happening too, right around you.
There absolutely is.
So walk us through, like, why the Marines? Why'd you join the military? And then what did that look like with you walking in faith with your wife?
Good question.
Yeah, I talk about my book that like the two toys that I always had with me as a kid was a hammer and a gun. And so I realize now that I was kind of always like God put in my DNA to be a protector and a builder, a protector, defender, and a builder. I'm extremely patriotic. So as I was going through, my teenage years, always drawn towards the military, I talked to recruiters of just about every branch. And finally, honestly, I was like, well, the Marines are the best. I had a coworker actually that ended up joining the Marine Corps Reserves like over a weekend. It was like we worked together on Friday. He showed up on Monday. Hey, I joined the Marines. I was like, wow, okay, interesting weekend. And once he started sharing that with me and just talking about the Marines being the best, and without a doubt they have the best uniform.
Right.
I was like, you know what? Yeah, I just want to be the best. And I did not get to play like high school tackle football, which I missed out on. But to me, that is probably the closest crucible type of experience that kids can go through without joining the military and going through a boot camp type experience. So I kind of just decided, you know what, I want the challenge. I want to prove it to myself. It did not hurt that my wife's father was also a Marine. And so when we started talking, he definitely steered me towards the Marine Corps. And then he's like, have you thought about becoming an officer? I think he was realizing that the quality of life for his daughter would be better if I was an officer. So I never even thought of that. So that was the direction that I ended up going.
Okay, wow. Awesome. And then walk us through just how hard it is being in that environment, being married, and having the faith. Because I know a lot of men struggle with this. It doesn't matter what job you have.
Yeah.
The workforce or military or police force, whatever that is, there's a big struggle there.
Yeah, no, I mean, being a Marine and then a police officer, those are two career fields where the divorce rate is extremely high. Promiscuity is extremely high. And in the Marine Corps, it was probably the biggest challenge for us. My experience as a married Marine, very different than if I had been single. Once again, having the sexual relationship with my wife really kept me from making a lot of stupid decisions. It actually breaks my heart the amount of honestly the sex trade that the military participates in when they deploy to places like the Philippines and Thailand. It actually breaks my heart. I think most people probably have no idea, but we were preparing for, I was tasked to be the officer in charge of an exercise to the Philippines. And as I was talking to some of the veteran Marines who had been many times, like they were all they could talk about was the specific prostitutes that they would be spending time with when we were in country. And most of these Marines were married. And a lot of people don't realize this. I don't know if the UCMJ still has a code against adultery, but when I was in the military 20 plus years ago, it was actually technically illegal for a married Marine to commit adultery. Like you could get technically arrested, kicked out. And so I remember hearing all of these, senior staff NCOs talking about, oh, can't wait to go see Mama San, whoever. And I'm thinking this is wrong, and really dealing with like, how am I as the OIC going to handle this? Because my conscience doesn't allow me, my oath of office doesn't allow me to do this. But even I'm hearing that my commanding officer has participated in some of this behavior. And for whatever reason, I ended up getting pulled from that detachment and sent to, this is when I went to 1st Marine Division and deployed to San Diego. But at the same time, I had other friends who talked about being in country and having, having to literally push sex workers away from them because of how aggressive they were. I had a fellow Christian married Marine friend who was a pilot, and he told me stories of being in Thailand and literally having to shake women off of his back is how aggressive they were. So it's a very difficult environment. And once again, I was so grateful that I was married as a Marine, and then going into law enforcement, kind of the same thing. I mean, the amount of sleeping around that happens is it's tragic. It's really sad.
Yeah.
And once again, we're going to talk about upgrade your circle, and we talk about running with lions. But what I realized is if I spent very little off-duty time with my coworkers, and I love law enforcement, but I realized based on the behavior and the morals of the majority of my coworkers that if I spent time with them off-duty, I would probably end up doing what they do, which was drinking too much and making poor decisions.
One of the principles in your book.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So it was just, hang out with my wife, find wholesome Christian friends, and just be selective about the people that you hang out with. That
I don't know if you
necessarily share the
maybe
values.
thought about some of these things as you were living this, and then it made it into your book. But I think this is a perfect opportunity for us to dive into the number one habit that will change your life. And that first is swimming upstream. That sounds like, around all the people that were choosing a sinful life that were living in darkness, you chose to go the other way and go upstream. It wasn't the easiest route. Walk us through this habit.
But 1 second.
Yeah.
Because I love it in your book when he was talking about being a police officer, right? So you were a good old cop, donut shop like I was back home, and you were getting a belly, and you were just tired, and there wasn't enough chutzpah, so to speak, within the marriage, within your own life. And you said, okay, time out here, and you bailed from that. And then you went and did what Jason just said. You jumped into the stream going up, versus you spent the longest time going downstream with the guys and gaining nothing at all. But you turned the corner. So what changed in your mind at that last time and said, okay, time out. I'm not going anywhere. I'm spending these thousands of hours with overtime, not gaining any money. I'm just tearing myself down and losing time with my wife and my kids. What really changed in your mind, Kev, that you said, okay, I got to stop this. I want to go this way. As Jason just said, I'm going to go upstream, no more downstream, because that's easy. But I get caught in the web of just nothingness. Versus you going upstream, I'm stripping away all the garbage, and I'm becoming this refined individual.
One of the biggest lessons that I've learned in my life is that we get stuck in paradigms, where we get tunnel vision.
Yep.
And if you have conversations or if you intentionally put yourself in a different environment, you can break out of those paradigms. And, I share some of those aha moments in my book. Even the simplest one is when my wife and I early on had conflict about my visits back to Ohio to see family. And we would both go for a week. And, literally it got to the point where we had to go to our pastor for counseling because of all the strife that spending a week in Ohio caused us in our marriage.
Yeah.
And he's like, why are you both going for the same amount of time? And I was like, wait a minute, great question. And so over and over in my life, it's someone else who just says something, they have a different perspective, they're an outside voice, or a different environment. So for me as a police officer, I had been a cop for 5 years. I didn't realize I was hitting the wall. Most people who have been in a first responder type career know what it's like to hit the wall. And I didn't know that I was there. And around the same time, my wife found this healthy community that helped her lose 35 pounds of baby weight after she had her third son. Wow. And it was this new environment that she started kind of dragging me into. I was kind of kicking and screaming, but finally decided to get healthy myself. And so I started spending more time with these people that were helping me get healthy. And I just got it was this new environment. So I kind of started this helped me get out of this paradigm because I had, and I think a lot of men will relate to this, I had a huge amount of my identity attached to being a police officer. Yep. The power and authority that comes, and just, the macho-ness of I've gun and a badge. It's really fun to tell people I'm a cop. They immediately like, oh, you're cool. They have a little bit of fear and respect for you. And so I had a lot of identity attached to it, and then went on an extended family leave for the birth of our son, and dreaded going back to work, and then went back to work and still hated it. And I was like, what is going on? And I was like, am I not gonna, I can't make it another 16 years dreading going to work like this.
Yeah.
But my mind, I was going to be a cop until I was at least 50. And so it was a lot of conflict. I had to really wrestle with the identity piece. But I was in this environment of people that were growth-minded. They would listen to personal development books, leadership books.
This was outside the police force, correct?
Yes,
Yep.
yes. Okay. And I even remember one of my coworkers with our shift, he's like, hey, what if we listened to 15 minutes of a John Maxwell book or a Stephen Covey book after our briefing before we hit the road? Because that day shift, things were pretty slow. We started at 6 o'clock. Things didn't really happen till 7:30. And I remember thinking, maybe. I wasn't really growth minded at this point, but not a single person on my shift had any interest in listening to either of those legends. And so it was just this, it just wasn't a growth minded, community of people. Now, maybe there's some teams out there now that are very growth minded in law enforcement. I don't know. I've got some friends that are in law enforcement and they are very growth minded, but the people that I was with were not.
Okay.
And so it just really stuck out to me. It made me realize that these people they're working their job, but they're not going upstream. Right. And so for me, that community helped me realize, man, if I want to actually shift from a poverty mindset, which is kind of like there's one pie for everyone to share, versus an abundance mindset, which is actually I can go out there and create more pies.
Right.
And when I do that, it actually adds to the economy. And I can pay people to do things for me because now I'm investing in their business. It was just a massive shift in how I thought.
Yeah.
And so it just realized, though, that you have to go upstream. And when you think of a current, lazy river, we have the Salt River here in Arizona, you can put your tube in and you have to do zero effort to go downstream.
Correct.
But if $1 million is upstream and you launch your boat, you're going to have to paddle like crazy to get to that $1 million.
Right.
Then that's what rowing upstream is all about.
Yeah, I liked something that you said about this upstream battle is that the ones that aren't going upstream, it's not that they're celebrating, but there's some type of conviction that they have about the person that's heading upstream enough to try to pull them back.
Yeah.
Right. And be like, why? And then this is where you had talked about surrounding yourself with the others. But I love the analogy of the salmon that I think you guys brought up.
Right.
Just to help men conceptually think about like what this truly looks like, right? So walk us through the salmon reference.
Well, yeah, if you understand salmon, their final journey is an upstream journey.
Yep.
But, obviously God's programmed into their DNA an incredible drive to get there, and knowing that it ultimately cost them their life. And I think it's a great analogy, but because of their effort and their commitment and their grit, and in my book, I also talk about grit with a compass. So grit, I think it's kind of a buzzword right now.
Yep.
But the idea here is a lot of people have grit, but they don't have that compass to that true North Star, right? What is God's calling on your life? Where are we really supposed to go? So a lot of people have grit, but they're going the wrong direction with it.
Right.
And so, our connection to salmon is if you're a Christian man, that am I willing to give my life for my family? Am I willing to give my life for the cause of the kingdom?
Yeah.
And that's what rowing upstream ultimately is. Because a lot of us, the American dream is, work and then retire.
Yep.
But retirement isn't a scriptural principle. And yes, maybe your roles in your jobs and things like that will change. But we talked about this. One of the reasons I want to be healthy is so I can be a better instrument in the hands of God, and a better ornament in the hands of God. But I want to be able to work and serve the Lord until the day I die, I run out of breath, and not spend the last, Lord willing, 10 years of my life on a ventilator.
But we both loved the illustration you gave us. With strong community and like-minded people, when the salmon goes up and falls on a rock, along comes beside him another salmon, which bumps him off the rock, puts him back in the stream, right? So community is critical to that. But help us illustrate that when we're going upstream and we're stripping away the nonsense of the world, we become an instrument versus an ornament that's just floating downstream. And so we've got life sustained by going up because we've got rid of the excess we're carrying on the back of us, right?
Right.
So share that with us as well, because that to me was so great, to be an instrument in God's hands and a great influence versus an ornament which just hangs.
Correct. Yeah. So, for me, like the transformation, the catalyst for me to Uncommon Freedom, to growing upstream, was my wife inspiring me to get healthy myself. She lost 35 pounds, looked incredible. I mean, after having 3 kids, she looked in the best shape and we met when she was, 18 years old. And so she inspired me to get healthy, and that was like the catalyst for me in everything. And, I think, fitness and health is talked about quite a bit right now, but the world's way of thinking about health is about being an ornament. And it's very easy for even, most, I think, Christians to think about, I want to look better in a swimsuit. I want a six pack, whatever it is.
Right.
But that is an ornament perspective. And I don't know that there's anything necessarily wrong with that, right? Part of it is stewarding our bodies. You want to, look good for your wedding. You want to look good when you go for a job interview.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with wanting to look good, for your spouse and your family and set a good example.
Yeah.
But I think it's more important for the real drive to be a better instrument. And so if you think of a piano, right? If it's out of tune, it can't really do what it's supposed to do as well as it should. And if your physical body is out of tune, overweight, dealing with medical conditions that are, for the most part, preventable if you're at a healthy weight, if you eat healthy, and if you move enough, that's how we get that piano into tune. And when you have a properly tuned piano or any instrument, all of a sudden it can be used to its full potential. And so that is why I think, the physical health component of our life is so important, is that we can be a better instrument in the hands of God, right? You're not out of breath.
Yeah.
Doing that mission trip in Africa or something like that.
Yeah.
You're in the best shape of your life so that you can, get more done.
I like that it's not something to shy away from, because you said something about your boys too, just kind of, giving you an attaboy type thing where it was your birthday and it was just kind of like, dang, Dad, like I look up to you because, you're fit and you're this and you're that, and at your age, that's harder to do. You're still going upstream, right?
Yeah, I turned 48 about 2 months ago, and I love the fact my wife has the boys just write out a note. I don't need a Hallmark card, and those notes I keep them and I treasure them, and especially as they've gotten a little bit older, like they're really heartfelt. My wife isn't prompting them on what do you like about Dad? It is my kids writing out what they really love. My boys are 14, 16, and 17, and all three of them, they didn't consult each other before writing their notes, but one of the things it says, Dad, I really respect you. Thanks for setting a good example in health, and I'm grateful for the fact that you can still be active with us, and that honestly we're proud. Like when our friends come over, they're like, "Man, your dad's in good shape," and that doesn't alone guarantee that we have a good relationship, but you couple that example. It does enhance our relationship because I'm able to do more stuff with them. I'm able to get off the sidelines and get onto the field with them.
Yeah, really cool. So jumping into number 2, the number 2 habit that would change your life is starting with 1.
Get to 1. Yeah. So we talked about this, but if you just imagine someone who has 1 penny and someone who is in debt 1 penny. So there's a 2 penny difference, a 2 cent difference. But if you double those numbers every day for 30 days, you end up with more than a $10 million difference. And the person with 1 penny is over $5 million rich 30 days later. And the person with that negative 1 penny is negative $5 million. And so it's so important, like as men, we want to provide for our families. And sometimes we're looking for that next big job. And the important thing to realize is, you know what? If I can just get to 1, if I can stop buying the biggest bass boat, the coolest truck, the coolest sports car, and going into debt for all these things, and I can get to 1 where my net worth is, if your net worth is just positive 1, you can now put into effect the compound effect, which I believe it was Ben Franklin who said, it was Ben Franklin or Einstein, one of them talked about the fact that the greatest mystery in the world is a mystery of compound interest. And then, the flip side is if you have that negative number and you multiply it, now you're ending up with a compounding negative number. And so it's easy to apply this to finances, but you can think about even relationships in your marriage, right? If you take an assessment, you say, okay, from negative 10 to positive 10, where am I in my relationship with my wife? If you're a negative 1, then just focus on adding some positives. Because if you add positive to a negative number over time, you'll get to 0 and then you'll get to 1. Right. And then what I found is that once you're in a positive, little things, they magnify themselves.
Yeah.
And you can go from good to great rather quickly. So the power of getting to one is really important
Yeah.
in finances, but really in every area of life, even in your health, right?
Yeah.
If you say, okay, if I were to rate my health right now, am I negative or am I positive?
Yeah.
And if you're negative, well, what is a positive addition that you can make to help get yourself to 0 and then to 1?
Right.
And then when you're a 1, like when I coach my clients, my goal for all my men is to help them get to below 20% body fat, because that's where statistically they're healthy. And then once they get to 20, I tease the idea of getting to 15. And not all of my guys are ready to do that right out of the gate. But the difference between, if you start at 30% body fat and you get to 20 and then you go to 15, that difference between 20 to 15 many times is significantly more obvious than the difference from 20 to 10, even though it's a smaller amount.
Right.
So that's how you can take, if you're positive, you can see that compound effect.
Yeah, yeah. I really like this because, like, just thinking about some of those like major topics that you have in your book, it's health, wealth, marriage, family, community, spirituality, and lifestyle. And when you think about that, I think a lot of men are thinking about all of the debits, right? That they're like not credits, right? They're just like, man, like just all of this output and nothing in return, right? But just like anything, you have to be okay with everything not coming your way almost immediately, instantaneously.
Yes,
right.
delayed
It's
gratification.
like total like self-gratification type mindset where it's like I perform this and I get this result like right after. Like, don't I just click on a button in Amazon, then it shows up the next day? Like, why do I have to wait? And it's like, because it's worth every little piece of that journey, each step. Just take one step at a time, earn 1 penny at a time, and make sure that you invest it. Right.
Well, even when you're compounding, like if you go type in a web search right now, a penny a day doubled for 30 days, and you look at the math, it's not until you're into the 20th something day where you really have a significant number, but then it just compounds. And so, yes, we have to just take these small steps, and then it's things happen gradually and then suddenly in life many times.
Yep.
And the point that you brought also is that you can't just jump into it, basically. It's like working out, right? Go to the gym, I'll work for 2 hours, and then you go there for 10 minutes and like, peace out, I'm done. Versus saying, you want to start working out? Then how about walking for about 15 minutes every single day? Then go and build it from there. But I think the American society is all about let's just go flat out. And to your point, Jay, press a button, I'm good to go. It takes time. And like your son said to you, geez, Dad, this is tough doing this stuff. But it's not a smooth mountain, it's a rough mountain. But every crevice is building strength in arm, muscle, and mindset to go to the next rung, basically.
I think, even when you think about marriage, right? A lot of men think, man, if I can take my wife on a romantic vacation for a week once a year, that would be incredible. I can guarantee you, if you, instead of doing that, if you had to choose, and if your wife had to choose between taking that romantic trip to Fiji and the rest of the year, your relationship sucked.
Yep.
Versus every single day, or even 5 days out of the week, you say something complimentary to her.
Yes.
You do something for her. Maybe you do the dishes that normally she does, without even her asking or saying, man, I'm really tired. You just initiate something. You figure out what her love language is, and you start speaking those love languages. If you did something small like that every single day, your relationship would be far better than that, exotic, expensive romantic vacation that you haven't really built a foundation on.
And I think we live in the future, yet we don't own the future. As my mom would always say, the future's a promissory note. We only own today, right?
Right.
So today we should be occupying as we walk out the door to go to do whatever we're doing, touching our wife on the shoulder, giving her a gentle kiss, not grabbing her breast, gentle kiss on her cheek and say, sugar, I love you dearly. Thanks for being you. Those are building blocks. As you start your day, you end your day. So if you desire to have personal time afterwards, you've now created that environment that then sustains a healthy late night evening with your wife.
I think that's the challenge of life, is realizing that, like you said, we're not guaranteed tomorrow, but yet it is a biblical principle to prepare for tomorrow.
Absolutely.
And so it's finding this balance of, how do I steward my health, my relationships, my finances, so that I'm prepared for the future.
Yes.
But not neglect today.
Amen.
So that I can, because a lot of times it's like, well, if I work really hard for the next 10 years, I'll be able to work less when my kids are, 15 years old, and I'll be able to spend 3 years of really intense time with them.
Right.
Not going to work.
Not going to work.
Right? Or if I just parent and work like crazy until till we're empty nesters, all of a sudden we'll have, this incredible marriage. Well, I mean, they call the graying of divorce is one of the biggest, the empty nesters are one of the highest percentage divorce populations. And I think a lot of that is because so many people are neglecting and pushing things down the road.
Yep,
And
I agree.
so yes, having that understanding of I need to invest now and for the future. So both and is kind of how I put that.
Yeah.
And understanding that those results, like just even achieving something like taking your first step in your faith, right? Starting with the scripture verse of the day.
Yes.
Right? Like just that one step in the right direction can lead to a much greater relationship with your creator and the one who actually died on the cross for all of our sins, who is
Amen.
Jesus Christ. And so I love that you talk about this because I think in a march, right, being Marines, when you're actually taking that step together, one step at a time, the momentum of having all those individuals around you just as inspired to go on that march and finish at the same time, which will lead us to the third habit, is building a very strong community. So let's jump into that. What is it like to build that community that's maybe somebody you're helping, but also somebody you're reaching to actually compete with, if you will?
Yeah.
They got that better marriage. You want to surround yourself with these people.
Yeah, so the third habit is upgrade your circle. And John Maxwell, who is one of my favorite leadership authors, and I've had the privilege of getting to know him over the last couple of years, and just an incredibly wise man. But he says, if you're the smartest person in the room, you need to find a new room. And I don't ever claim to be the smartest person in a room. And sometimes people might take that, as a cocky type of attitude. But the reality is that just like a goldfish is limited by the size of the bowl that you put it in, we as humans are limited by the closest influences that we have.
Yeah.
And so upgrading your circle is this relentless pursuit to constantly become the best version of yourself. And you don't go from a 1 to a 10 overnight. You go from a 1 to a 2 and a 2 to a 3. And what I've found is that although sometimes there are 10s that will help a 1 become a 2, normally it's a 3 or a 4 that helps that 1 become a 2. And then you become a 2, and then you have this 4, or maybe it's a 3 or 4 or 4 or 5, helping you pull you up. And so it's just saying, okay, I'm better in this. I'm a better husband today than I was a year ago. But I could be a better husband a year from now if I'm intentional about it and I have the right mentor helping me do that. So in every area of your life, it's about identifying who are the closest influences and who is someone that I know that is living the better version of what I want to be, and being intentional about putting yourself in a circle with them.
Yeah.
And that's what upgrading your circle is about. It's not saying that, Jason, I'm too good for you anymore. Absolutely not. Like we talked about this, especially when you use the boat analogy of rowing upstream, upgrading your circle is saying, hey, maybe if you think of initially it's a small boat and then it's a bigger boat. And then you're saying, okay, I'm going upstream. I'm looking for people to join me in my boat, because as long as we're all rowing upstream, some people, like if you have a family, you understand that, right? If you put your whole family in a boat, my 7-year-old daughter, if she paddles, the impact is going to be less than one of my teenage boys.
Yeah. Sure.
Right? But that's okay, because that's what she's capable of. That's what her capability is. I'm not going to hold that against her. But if she starts rowing opposite, I'm going to say, hold on a second. That's not okay. You're making it harder for us.
Yeah.
And a lot of times we will continue to associate with people who are actually rowing downstream. And you will never get upstream if you're tethered and yoked to people who are going downstream. So I will say, hey, are you willing to go upstream with me? And if the answer is yes, I'll accept whatever their capabilities are.
Yeah.
If the answer is no, then I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You know, and I mean, this is not saying like I'm not going to evangelize people. I'm not going to share the gospel with people. That's what I'm talking about. But what I'm talking about is the people that influence you and that you spend most of your time with. I mean, if you have a job, you can't control who HR hires.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right. But they're going to be in that outer circle. And you're not going to necessarily allow all of those people into your inner circles.
Right.
And in my book, I talk about really 3 concentric circles, and the innermost one are the people that have the most influence in your life. And
Yeah.
so you're just going to be very selective about who you let from those outer circles into that inner
Yeah,
circle.
I like that just because we talked yesterday about going upstream, even if you're not paddling, right, and you're complacent in some of those areas, can be detrimental because you'll still be heading downstream.
Right.
So doing nothing leads to nothing.
Is actually doing something.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
So
Yeah. And the flip side is that you will go through challenges in life, and you're gonna. I've got a friend right now who's going through a cancer battle. I mean, super healthy guy. You're like, how in the world? Like, you realize that Satan runs this world right now when a great Christian man who's healthy like this has horrible cancer, and it's rocking his family's world. But they're still going upstream because they have people in their boat with them that are paddling for them. And so that's why it's so important to have the right people in your boat. Because if they were tethered, if they had people that were rowing downstream, those people would say, you know what? There is no God, right? God doesn't care. Why do you worship this God? Why do you work so hard? But instead, people are saying, man, I don't get this. I'm hurting with you. I'm praying for you. And so when you have to bring your oars in because you're just exhausted, because that if you live long enough in this world, you're going to experience things.
Yep.
But if you have the right people in your boat, you'll actually still be going upstream, even when you personally can't paddle.
yeah, love it. Thank you so much for sharing these 3 habits that will change men's lives. Thank you very much for tuning in here at the Legacy Men's Podcast. Gary, did you want to close us out on anything else?
No, I wanted this basically. I think you've captured the in our mind, but I think the biggest thing is. The biggest thing for me, the biggest takeaway is that your community is so critical to your overall strength and sustainability in life. In the sense you were saying, the young man has got a cancer issue, so he's going to chill in the boat while we continue to row upstream. So I think it's just being honest, being truthful, and just allowing ourselves, if we do err, we stop, but we keep going on. Pausing is okay as we do the journey uphill. That's totally cool. And sometimes when you have a need, no matter how you feel, reach out to that person in your inner circle that can lift you back up again as well. So Kevin, thank you for your life. Thank you for your book, guys. This is an awesome, life-changing book. Also, Kevin has put it on Audible, so you can listen on Audible as you drive down the road. So again, thanks for being who you are. We greatly appreciate it, Kev, and giving us your valuable time today.
Thanks, Jets. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Kev. Appreciate it. Awesome. Thank you.